Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder it's time to have a look at the Lagg-3-4, one of the rarest vehicles that we have in War Thunder. It's a rank 1 battle rating 2.3 Soviet aircraft that you will find in the tree here if you have it. Now, graciously Gaijin has given me a test drive for it for 30 days, so I can show it to you guys and basically, talk about it and kind of its origins. So when I actually asked around about this aircraft, I got a few answers back from some people who work at Gaijin about, how to basically get it. And to be honest, it's quite hard to. So the Lagg-3-4, it was given to Gaijin developers and also some volunteers, generally people who contributed to the game in a reasonable or large manner very early on. And the Lagg-3-4 that you see before you was never an event vehicle in the game. And the other two vehicles, which are similar to us, the Lagg-3-23 and the I-301, have been issued as event vehicles in the past. So this has technically never been available to the actual public, to the actual general players. Now, hopefully in the future, it will be available or open to players, but this is literally just open to, as I said, Gaijin developers and then volunteers who have helped with the project over time. So with it, let's go through its statistics, let's go through how it flies, all of that wonderful stuff. At 2.3, it's got some competition. Oh, by the way, if you want to know what the I-301 is, it's a rank 1 2.7 aircraft, which is very similar to the plane that we're looking at today. The only real difference is that it has a 23mm in it and what feels like a more powerful engine. But anyway, I don't have the Lagg-3-23, unfortunately. I only have the Lagg-3-34 with the big 37mm in it. But anyway, the Lagg-3-4 is, well, a Lagg. If you don't know what a Lagg is, there is a line of them right here, and there is a few issues with the Lagg line, but the early ones are quite, at least they feel underpowered when flying them, but once you hit the Lagg-3-35, you generally have a pretty good time. The balance of weaponry and engine power is pretty good. The Lagg-3-4, though, it's kind of, unfortunately, got one of those things where it has too much firepower, which is normally something I don't really, or nobody really complains about, but there are some planes out there which do have too much. So Lagg-3-4 has a 20mm Shavak, which is centrally mounted through the engine. Then we have a 12.7mm gun, and then also on top of that we have two 7.62s. So we have the 12.7mm Berezin right here, then we have the 7.62 Shikas, and one either side. You can see it has a lot of ammunition when it comes to 7.62s, not a lot when it comes to 12.7s and the 20mm, but enough firepower to be able to knock out targets quite easily. Then you've got the Klimov VK105P 12-cylinder inline, which has a max power of 1,020 horsepower, takeoff power of 1,143 horsepower, but it is quite heavy for what it is. Also, you have some cooling systems, liquid and oil. So, water cooling systems and oil cooling systems, and then pretty much fuel tanks all through the wings, which are self-sealing with neutral gas pressurization system. I love how the fuel tanks, every time I come back to them, they've had a slight tweak to them, or, some are different to others. That's wonderful. Then, of course, you have the pilot. Armor on this thing, you've got a backplate, that's about it. So, your engine is very fragile, along with all the guns in it, meaning that shooting center mass is how to deal with this thing. Very similar to basically any Lagg-3-34, any Lagg in general. Just shoot center mass, and what you'll find is if you don't hit the engine, you'll either hit this, or you'll hit the pilot, or you'll hit the oil cooling system, and the engine will die very quickly. The Lagg is very dependent on its cooling systems, just because its engine likes to tear itself apart quite easily, especially since machines like this have war emergency power, and you have to kind of push them to the limit to be able to be competitive against certain aircraft. So, yeah, if you're worried about facing a Lagg, just understand where to shoot it is just straight up center mass. If we look at the modifications of this machine, we can see that since it's a premium, you get everything unlocked for free, so you don't have to worry about that. And also, you get belts on each of your guns. Now, generally, if you have a lot of guns on a machine, what will happen is one will kind of be left by the wayside, and you don't get to choose the ammo belts on it. Well, on this machine, you can choose all the ammo belts, and they are the standard, really good ammo belts from the Soviets. You know, a lot of AP, a lot of I, a lot of explosive if you want to. There's a lot of options here when it comes to the guns. So the 20mm Shavak, I normally either go for ground targets because it has a lot of explosive filler in it, and at 2.3 you don't run into a lot of aircraft which actually have a lot of armor, so you can kind of tear them apart. But if you want to be safe, armored targets is the way to go. With the 12.7s, it's pretty much simple. Do you want to kill ground targets? Well, you take the ground targets belt. If you want to kill air targets, you take the air targets belt. The only difference between this belt and this belt is the idea of the APIC round, which has a cement core in it, whereas the air targets does not have this. I personally like air targets on this thing, just because I don't really use it to kill any ground forces. I use it directly as a fighter. Then, for the 7.62s, I have always preferred using the tracers, just because it's API, APIT, you get a good mix of tracer, you get a good mix of AP, and of course incendiary as well. And so those are the rounds that I use for this machine. You also have a minimum load of 20 minutes of fuel, which is quite high, especially for rank 1. But it is, doable. You can bleed some fuel through the war emergency power, but it would be nice if it had a little bit less. But you can't have everything in this world. On top of it, this actually gets some cool skins. So you have the standard skin, which you see here, which is kind of a tricolor camouflage. Then you have a Finnish Air Force camouflage, which looks really nice, and hopefully will eventually become a nice sign to come when we talk about the game. You've got the lovely insignia. You've got, once again, a general bicolor camouflage, and then the yellow accents on it. Looks really nice. And then you have a winter camouflage, which is just the straight white one. And for me, I really like the straight white camouflage on the Laggs. I think it looks really nice. And it isn't exactly straight white, but it's very similar. Like, you can see there is a color differentiation here, and also on the wings. There is a slight color differentiation if you look down here. So it is technically bicolor, even though it's very hard to tell if you're looking like from here, or you can kind of tell from here. It just kind of looks like some areas are more shadowed than others. But yeah, it's got some lovely skins on it. It's got a lot of guns on it. It's got a big engine in it. The only issue when we look at it generally is it would be nice if it had a bit more armor. But, you can't get everything. Also, at battle rating 2.3, what is really nice is the fact that you have a pretty good ground forces lineup. So if you want to take this thing in ground forces, you can take it along with a bunch of 2.3s. So you got the T-80, you got the ZIS-30, the Su-76M, and the T-28. So that is a wonderful 2.3 lineup. You can throw in the Gaz if you want to do some anti-tank or anti-aircraft support, and then you can also throw in the Su-76M if you feel like it's at 2.3. You could even, if you wanted, if you had the T3 or the BM-824, the Su-57, there's a lot of options here that you can throw in with the Lagg-3-4. And also with aircraft, because the basic way, I like taking 3 ground vehicles and then 2 aircraft, like that's how I run everything. So at 2.3, you've got a lot of options. MiG-334, Lagg-335, IL-241, and then the Yak-2 cab, the Yak-4, and even stuff like the I-16 Type 24, the Yak-7B. It's very hard to justify taking this thing, but since it doesn't have any secondary armaments, it's very hard to justify taking this thing over some other fighters, which I believe perform better than it. And so stuff like the Yak-7B, even if you don't like the aircraft, it still has access to some secondary armament, so it'll be useful more in ground realistic. It also handles better in the air. It does have less firepower and ammo, so that's something to take into account. Same with like the Lagg-335. You know, it's got secondary armaments once again. It has less ammo, so it's a trade-off. For me, I would much prefer taking the Lagg-3-35 or any other fighter, really, apart from this, just because of the secondary weapon loadout for ground realistic. But if you have something like the Lagg-3-34, well, you can just stick it in there and take it out instead. You know, instead of the Lagg-3-4. Also, talking about up-tiering it, you know, if you want to do like a 2-7 lineup, such as like the T-28E, or the Zut, or, you know, something like that, or the M3 Medium, if you felt like it, the up-tiering capabilities, I would actually say, are not the best, just because you have the I-16 Type 27, this machine here, has access once again to secondaries, really good fighter as well. The Lagg-366, which is, in my opinion, one of the weaker Lags for its BR, it also gets access to secondaries, and then you also are competing with the I-29, the I-301, and also all the other ones that we talked about before, plus the DB3B. So, for me, it's very hard to justify up-tiering this thing. In ground realistic, I think it would be much better just to use another one of the aircraft that I talked about. So therefore, if you're going to run it, you're going to have to run it at 2-3, and luckily, at least you have a good lineup, you know, with the ZIS-30, the T-80, and then, of course, the big Mamba Jamba, the T-28. Anyway, let's get into some gameplay for this machine and have a chat about it. When I look at the low-tier Rank 1 and 2 Soviet fighters, what I see is a lot of aircraft which are incredibly powerful. The Yak-7B, the MiG-334, even the MiG-315, the Lagg-366 is pretty good. You know, there's a lot of stuff in the standard tech tree which works really well for the Soviets. But the problem is there is a big contrast. So, with some of the earlier stuff, such as the Lagg-3-8, if you've ever flown that aircraft, what you'll find is that it just does not feel nice. It doesn't feel as nice as the Yak-7B. The Yak-1 also doesn't feel as nice as the Yak-7B. The MiG-315BK can feel heavy because of the engine just not having enough power. And there is a direct contrast, as I said, between, you know, the nice aircraft and the aircraft which it feels sluggish to push them around. The Lagg-3-4 definitely sits on the side of the spectrum of I am pushing it around, right? So with something like a Yak-7B, it is nice to fly. It feels good. It's not as maneuverable as something like a Spitfire. It's not as maneuverable as, let's say, a Hurricane or even maybe a Bf-109. But I know my strict advantages over those aircraft, and I know how to catch them, and if I do catch them, I can set up a kill on them. When it comes to the Lagg-3-4, it feels like there is that extra 10% of flying this thing that I need, right? I need that extra 10% of power, or I need that extra 10% of skill to be able to use this thing on the same level as something like a Yak-7B. And that, it's not impossible to do, but the question is, would I want to put myself at a disadvantage compared to using another plane? And the whole thing revolves around, with the Lagg-3-4, is its weaponry. The weaponry on it is good. I have not sawn planes in half, but what I have done a lot of is set them on fire or cripple them. It doesn't seem to be a weapon system that is designed to annihilate unless you can get really close in and get all guns on target, but from around, you know, convergence range, you should be completely fine. The problem, though, is all of your guns have different muzzle velocities. So if you're firing from any type of range, unless you are, you know, selecting the weapons differently, you are going to struggle in order to get every gun on target at the same time. On top of this as well, with it is much harder to get guns on target in this than other aircraft similar, you know, the similar Soviet aircraft at this BR. because of the heavy nose, because it has all of these guns in the nose. I found that anything above 500 kilometers an hour, like it says that in the stat card that the max speed of this thing is, you know, it's less than 600 kilometers an hour. I've been able to push this thing to 650 in a dive without too many issues. The problem is it does lock up hard above 500, so basically anything from 600 to 650 or above, it's going to lock up, so that's something you're going to have to take into account. But the sweet spot is definitely the 350 to 500 range for this. If you can get it in there, if you can get it turning, if you can get it looping, you can easily annihilate enemies, you know, really well, as long as you get the jump on them. So my experiences with the Lagg-3-4 is climbing to a decent altitude with war emergency power. Like, it's got pretty good, it's got, oh, well, I shouldn't say pretty good, it gets outclimbed by a lot of the meta vehicles so that it faces. So the BF-109, for example, the HE-100 outclimbs it. Stuff like the P-36 is pretty much on par with it in my experience. The later P-40 outclimbs it. But the main thing is you can circumvent these by just having a little bit of patience and just waiting for a minute and waiting for the enemies to dive, you know, on the allies that you have, and then you create, you know, 2-on-1 situations. So this thing is, in all of my experiences where I've used this thing, fighter on fighter, either against a BF-109, a HE-100, P-36, P-40, I have always found that I'm getting completely outclassed by the plane that I'm facing. It is able to decelerate faster than I can, accelerate faster than I can, it's able to turn better than I can, it's able to it's able to keep its energy better than I can. The only thing so far that I've found in a mano-y-mano fight, in a one-on-one fight, that the Lagg-3-4 can do better is flap control compared to some machines, and also it is able to dive slightly better than you know, some of the planes that I've faced. So it's obviously not a one-on-one plane. It is a... The ally over there is going to set up a kill. I am going to come in. I am going to set up a 2-on-1 situation. I'm going to use my supreme firepower while the enemy is distracted on the ally to be able to take them out. Now, with this said, this playstyle takes a lot of setup. It takes a lot of working out where to sit. It takes a lot to try and make sure that you know what's kind of going on, you know, in the battlefield. Because if you decide to help a teammate over there who has got 2 guys on him, you know, you clean up those 2 guys, but then you've got 3 guys above you, right? And there's nothing you can do about it. So the initial engagement that you make, the initial ignition of your fight, is crucially important in this machine. You've got to really make sure that you personally know exactly when you want to fight, know exactly when is the right time to fight, because if you don't, you're going to get crucified. Because once you're low, even if you're at high speed, you make one turn, you've lost all your energy, and there's nothing you can do about it, and it's very, very depressing to be able to do. And as I said, you get outturned, you get your energy retention is worse. In a straight line speed, maybe you're as good. I would have to actually check that. I've never really had any elongated battles in this when it comes to stretched out battles, just because at low tiers you generally don't get that. But the nose just feels incredibly heavy, and this is also exemplified in another thing. Pitching the nose up in this aircraft, it doesn't feel good unless you're going above like 350, 400 kilometers an hour, IAS of course. And if an aircraft is coming down on you, which will happen quite a lot since, you know, a lot of stuff outclimbs you, you can try and pitch your nose up, and it just flat out says, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that playstyle today. We're not going head on. Instead, you're going to have to roll over. You're going to have to hopefully not get shot, and you're going to have to survive. Which is just like, okay, well, this is the first aircraft, or sorry, one of the first aircraft where I've got that feeling, where it's, you know, it doesn't want to pitch up to actually take a head-on, which it's good at. It's got so many guns in it. It's great at head-ons, you know, just like a lot of these Soviet aircraft are. It would just be nice if it was a little bit lighter on the nose. I think that is the main problem that this aircraft has, and if it was lighter on the nose, like, what a surprise, you know, you take off the 762s on later aircraft, compared to the Lagg-3-4, and guess what, you know, you have a much better aircraft which handles so much better. It is definitely sluggish. It definitely feels like that, but it's okay. It's like, it's an average plane which gets done out by the meta vehicles, right? I bet you if it went against, you know, different types of vehicles a lot, like if it didn't face Zeros and if it didn't face Key 44s and instead kind of just got like a general branch across the place with all the different vehicles, it would come out as a very much standard average vehicle. But in War Thunder, that doesn't really matter, when the people who carry games or the people who do really well are either at low tiers bomber pilots, because, you know, they have a massive influence on the game, or an ace in a very much meta vehicle who just takes over everything. So yeah, my experiences in it, I just wish it was a little bit lighter. And then I definitely could see it, you know, doing really well. Unfortunately, it isn't, and therefore it fails in many regards. That one would hope that it would be good at. Anyway, I just want to once again thank Radeon for giving me this plane on rent so I could show it to you guys. I hope you have all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.